Hello everyone, TLSG here, back again with another daily Marvel Snap video. So today, although it is a new hot location, which means the location appears 60% more often, it is a relatively unimpactful one. It is not one that is completely polarizing like Sinister London, where you really want cards that are going to be good to be duplicated, or cloning vats, or Kamar Taj. Crimson Cosmos is just okay. You can play around this location pretty easily with most decks, and so I didn't have a just outright build for the hot location, but the one that we're going to be showcasing today works very well with the location, and it will work well even after the location is gone. As an added upside, we are on Sulky Hulky. We are on the free-to-play account. Today we are going to be featuring the pull 3 card Mysterio. And honestly, even without Mysterio, you can run this list, just add another 2-cost card. That way you can really flood the board. You can get as much impact out of Blue Marvel as possible. If you are going with that route, you may take out some of the higher cost cards or higher cost components to add in more zoo style elements. That way you can get the most upside out of your Blue Marvel and your Onslaught effects. And so running through the deck list really quickly. First up, we have Sunspot. He's going to be a good card to throw on the board if you find yourself in a position that you later want to lock down a lane with Storm or Professor X. You can do that pretty easily with a Sunspot lane. And then if not, and you've already locked down one of the locations, you can always skip a turn or two with Sunspot to gain additional power to push yourself up over that edge. And then we have Iceman. He offers a little bit of disruption, and so you may hit the opponent's curve card that makes it really difficult for them to play the combo pieces that they want to. And he is going to be able to be zooed out onto the board. After we have all of our buffs in effect, he will be a 4 power card, which is going to be pretty decent. He is susceptible to a Killmonger or an Electra, but we're not relying all of our power push on the Iceman. Then we have Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler always goes hand in hand with aggro lists that include Angela, because you're going to be able to drop him into the Angela lane and then move him out. So instead of just being 2 power, he essentially offers a 4 power board presence by allowing us to buff up Angela 1 additional time. And then we have Angela. She's going to be great to have cards flooded in this lane. Typically you'll want to split up your big power pushes in either like your Bishop or Angela into 2 different lanes so that you're not putting all of your eggs in one basket. But if you have another strong push like a Storm, Jessica Jones, sometimes maybe you want to do the Angela and the Bishop in the same lane. But for the majority of games, you want to split your 2 big power pushes. That way, as the game develops, you can pivot if needed. And then we have the pull 3 card, the only pull 3 card in this list, Mysterio. Mysterio works amazingly with Bishop. The fact that each of the Mysterio tokens also buff up Bishop and Angela, even if they're not the real Bishop, offers so much board presence. It offers a lot of mind games against the opponent because they won't know for sure where your power push is. And so then if you later do a Storm or a Professor X, they won't know for sure if that is where your power lies. And then we have Bishop. He's going to grow stronger for each card that we play. The biggest enabler for Bishop in this list is our Mysterio. So if you know that you're going to most likely play Bishop and Mysterio in a particular game, you'll usually want to hold Mysterio until after Bishop has been on the board. That will allow you to buff Bishop 3 times just by dropping the Mysterio card onto the board. And then we have Storm. She's going to be able to shift a location so that we can lock it down. With this deck list, we have a lot of like late game power push into locked down lanes. We have a lot of like side push of power with like a Claw or a Blue Marvel. And we have a great follow-up to her with Jessica Jones. Jessica Jones was recently buffed. She now on reveal, if you don't play a card here next turn, is +4. So she is one of the best follow-up cards to a Storm combo now that she's been reworked. She is in line to hitting the on reveal trigger of a Drax, only it doesn't matter if the opponent plays a card there or not. She will be able to get that added bonus as long as not something like a Cosmo lane or something similar. And then we have Blue Marvel. Blue Marvel is going to offer us some additional power in the game. With the most recent patch, he was moved from a 6 cost down to a 5 cost, and his power was reduced from 4 to 3. But at the 5 card slot, especially in an aggro style list, he offers an immense amount of board presence. So being able to have 3 power from himself, and then an additional 4 power for each lane that's fully capped out of cards, usually you'll end up getting about 10 to 12 overall power presence from him with this list. If you went with something a little bit more zoo style, you could even increase that upside a little bit further. And then we have Professor X. Professor X is going to be great with the ability to push additional power sideways. So sometimes we're going to drop Professor X and maybe they accidentally counter it and they play a card there, they have 3 or 4 additional power. Most likely the opponent is going to snap because they think they have that lane locked down. the following turn, we're going to be able to drop Claw, which pushes power sideways to further buff up that Professor X lane and push it over the edge that we need. And either that, or we can drop Blue Marvel, which can buff up our cards just ever so slightly, and that may also be the push that we need to get that lane up over that threshold. And then we have Claw. Claw is going to be a good way to push power sideways, either into a Storm lane where we got beaten, or into a Professor X lane where we just don't quite have enough power push to have locked it down. And then finally, we have Onslaught. Onslaught is going to be a great enabler for both our Blue Marvel and our Claw. If we put Blue Marvel on the board and later follow up with the Onslaught, that is going to be a +2 power to every single card on the board, very similar to the old Nova, but they also offer a decent board presence as well. And then as a backup target, maybe we drop Claw and then we drop Onslaught into the Claw lane so that we push additional power over to the right while trying to compete for whatever lane the Claw and Onslaught are located in. Overall, I found that this feels a little bit better than like a Khazar Zoo that runs Khazar, Blue Marvel, and then you're trying to stack Onslaught on top of both of those, because those decks are very susceptible to Killmonger, which is not all that uncommon, especially while you're in Pool 3. And so this one overall feels like it gives a pretty good power push. It offers a few different play lines to find a win condition, and just overall feels really fun to play. And so with that being said, we are going to go ahead and jump into a couple games. Alright, so first up we have Mayo, and the first location is the Crimson Cosmos. So we're either going to be able to push like a Jessica Jones there, we can do a Professor X if they don't play anything before turn 4 to try to push just a little bit of power there, or we can forego it and end up dropping our Blue Marvel and our Onslaught into the Crimson Cosmos lane to buff up the cards we have in the other locations. And so let's go ahead and drop our Iceman. That's going to offer a little bit of disruption onto Mayo's cards. And the fact that it's Death's Domain is pretty fortunate. That means that they're going to have a hard time playing cards into this location. That should be an easy target for like a Professor X if they do, or if we're afraid that they're going to be able to maybe go wide. And so we have the Angela Bishop. We also have a Jessica Jones that we draw into, which is going to be great for the Crimson Cosmos lane. Overall, we're looking pretty solid. Depending on what we think they have, we could even do the Jessica Jones into the Bishop lane. But the Avengers compound is the far right location, so we'll have to play cards into the Avengers compound lane next turn. And so since we're going to have to play cards there, it'd be hard to trigger her own availability. So let's go ahead and keep her in the Crimson Cosmos. We push a little bit of power there, and then maybe we can get lucky and lock down the Avengers compound lane. Maybe we just drop a Sunspot and skip, depending on what they flip into here. So if they don't get very lucky with, they don't get incredibly lucky with their flips here. So we can do a Sunspot, which will gain an additional 4 power, so it's a 5 power card that's going to buff up our Bishop by 1, our Angela by 2. If they rotate this last card here, and it's not a very big card, we should have a pretty good shot at winning here. We have the 8 power in Crimson Cosmos, the 2 in Death's Domain, which is going to be difficult to push additional power in. So they play a Baron Mordo, it draws us into a Nightcrawler, turns out to be 6 cost. That's okay. That is, actually, that's fine. So they flip into, I don't know how fine it is though. So they flipped into a Magneto, which pulled our Jessica Jones, our recently buffed up Jessica Jones, over into the far right lane, which ends up capping it out. We currently have a 1 power lead over them, but to push the power we need, we're going to have to drop either like a Claw or something into the Crimson Cosmos lane. If they had a Jubilee, they could do it into Death's Domain and try and overcome our power here. Or if they passed, they would end up losing, but depending on how much they passed by, was going to make it difficult for us to figure out where our win condition lied. But they did end up retreating. The Claw was going to push additional power into Death's Domain just in case they pulled a Jubilee. And then our Sunspot and Bishop would both buff up by 1. And so overall, not a bad first game. Let's go ahead and rinse and repeat and jump back into another. All right, so next up we have Armored Porcupine. And the first location is Hala, so they may avoid... Okay, maybe I was wrong. I was going to say they may avoid pushing power there for fear of it getting destroyed, but I guess not. So I'm going to go ahead and drop our Angela into the Muir Island location. That way she can get buffed up turn over turn. I think next turn we may end up doing something like a Storm over there. And they did use a discard card, which discarded a Gigantos. So they're probably running some form of like either a Hela deck or something that runs like either a Lockjaw to rotate or a Ghost Rider to resummon. And so we do need to be kind of aware of that potential. So let's go ahead and play the Storm. That is going to change Muir Island, and then we can follow up with a Jessica Jones on 4. On 5, we can do potentially a Professor X. It just depends on what it looks like we are going to be running up against. And so if they don't drop anything these next couple of turns, maybe we look fine. Turn 3 for a Hela style list now is much more difficult than it was before. With the rework to Lady Sif, it doesn't flow quite as well. But let's go ahead and do the Jessica Jones. Ooh, they have a Jubilee, so we'll see what kind of deck they're running now, which pulls into Invisible Woman, which does kind of to me scream most likely Hela. But they have a pretty low kind of stack here, so even if they get a card that's resummoned, we might still be able to have the upside in this lane. Okay, and so I'm going to stack all of my cards into this lane just in case we end up drawing into and want to drop like a blue Marvel next turn. Otherwise, we might do something like a Claw to push additional power into the flooded lane. We might do a Professor X to make sure that they can't resummon anything into the Avengers compound. It just kind of depends. So they have a Gambit, which is going to destroy one of the cards, but it's... Oh, the Jessica Jones is a hard hit. That was a really hard hit. And I didn't see what got discarded, unfortunately. But I think we do a Claw, and then we do a Nightcrawler over into the right-hand side. We do have a decent power push here. We were going to push 5 additional power into the flooded lane. They may not have drawn into their Hela, or maybe they just didn't have a good play line. But we do get pretty lucky. But overall, not a bad second game. Let's go ahead and jump into the next one. All right, so next up we have Autrex, and the first location is Dream Dimension, which is pretty tough for a turn 5 play. We don't have a lot of great 4 cost drops, and so we'll have to rely on like a Jessica Jones on that turn, or maybe even something a little bit smaller. But it does kind of hurt. The second location is Crimson Cosmos, which they have a little bit of a power push there with their Squirrel, but if they're running something like a Destruction style deck that runs a Killmonger, that's not really going to be too relevant. But while we're waiting for them to decide, I do have a shout out that I want to give. On our Friday live stream, before the stream even started, we had a new member join the channel, and not just a membership, but they joined as a Mega Supporter, which is the highest tier that I have available. And so thank you so much, Karel. The massive amount of support that gives me and my channel and the content is insane. So thank you so much. For that support. It truly is appreciated. Okay, and so here we're going to go with a Storm into the far left lane. We don't know which one of these has the 5 power Mysterio, but I think that's a gamble that we're willing to take here. And that causes the cards not to cost 1 additional on turn 5, so we're going to be able to do something like a Blue Marvel and then an Onslaught, which I think is going to be a pretty big power play. It was going to be a pretty big power play. We were going to be able to do Jessica Jones was our next move. That would give us a huge flooded location. On turn 5, probably something like a Blue Marvel and an Onslaught here. To push some power in this location, we push a little bit of power to the left and right as well. But they did end up retreating. And so on Sulky Hulky, everyone is still trying to climb. And so I find that people retreat much more often than they do on my main account, where we're already past Infinite. Alright, so next up we have Songkia. The first location is Crimson Cosmos. So we're going to go ahead and play our Iceman into the far right. We most likely won't have a turn 2 drop unless we top deck into like an Angela or a Mysterio. They discard their Storm. We discard our Professor X. Not incredibly great for us, but not terrible either. So we are going to drop Angela. We know that they had a Storm, so they may be running some form of like a lockdown style list, just like we are. So we do need to kind of be on the lookout for those particular cards. And so here, I think we're going to Storm the negative location. That will flip it for us. Right now, all cards are there. We're going to be -3 power. That'll add those back. Ooh, and so they do a Polaris, which pulls an additional card over, which is going to be actually fine for us. So let's go ahead and drop Bishop in that lane as well. On turn 5 and 6, we'll do something like a Blue Marvel and an Onslaught. That should lock down this flooded location. I think that would be enough to probably swing the Crimson Cosmos, depending on what and where they drop on turn 5. Okay, and so they drop a card over in that lane as well. They send us a Hood with the Viper, but honestly, I think that's okay. We're gonna end up buffing that up to a zero power card by the time we get done with the Blue Marvel and the Onslaught. And so right now they are winning the flooded location because of the 6-power demon, but we know that this looks like a junk style deck where they're sending it like a send 'em crap style list, but it ran a storm for some reason. And so Blue Marvel is going to be able to help us buff up these cards. I think we do it into Sokovia. I think they probably, if they have anything, push it over into Crimson Cosmos. No, let's go into Crimson Cosmos. I think that's going to be a little bit harder for them to play into. If, oh my gosh, I thought they were going to drop the Doc Ock in Crimson Cosmos. Holy moly. Well, so our Blue Marvel is going to impact more cards here because they did pull them in with the Doc Ock, but unfortunately, unfortunately at the last minute, I reversed the order of where we were going to drop our Blue Marvel. I honestly thought if they dropped this, they would drop it in Crimson Cosmos to like draw into all of our cards. But unfortunately, I was not correct in that assumption. So we are going to go ahead and drop a Mysterio that leaves only 3 power here. But if they drop a card over there, it has to be a 4, 5, or 6 cost card. So that's going to be pretty difficult for them. They would have to drop 2 cards here. And I don't think, thinking through the play line, they could drop like a Spider-Woman over onto the left. That's not going to be able to win both of those lanes. Overall, we got pretty lucky with the Doc Ock pull, with the Blue Marvel. And so that is 4 up and 4 down. We are going to go ahead and jump into the next one. All right, so next up we have a Reclusive Mind. We're going to drop our Sunspot into the far right lane. They drop a Human Torch. So maybe they're running like a bounce style list. It's weird that they put it all the way in the left lane though. We end up discarding our Blue Marvel. They discard their Cloak. So that is one of their move components down the drain. And we are most likely going to trade cards on turn 6. So that's going to be difficult for them as well. I'm going to go ahead and play Mysterio into Sokovia. That will push power tokens all across the board. They're not going to know for sure where our power really lies. And then we do have the Sunspot lane that's going to be able to buff up over time. And then it could end up being the Crimson Cosmos. Ooh, it turns out to be Luke's Bar. So let's go ahead and snap. That's going to be hard for them to push power into. They don't have their... I mean, they could have a Doctor Strange, but overall, I think it's going to be pretty difficult for them. So I think we're going to do a Storm. We don't have anything great to follow up with it on... Okay, so they do a Storm as well. And so we both do Storm. We don't have a great way to follow up on it on turn 4 in our hand just yet. Maybe we'll top deck into Jessica Jones, which would be beautiful. If not, then we... that's not it. So we're going to play Nightcrawler over into the far left lane, just so that we have some of that power there. Professor X is going to be pretty handy for us. So if they end up trying to like drop a Heimdall or something to shift power over into the flooded lane on the last turn, Professor X is going to lock that in place. And we do know that there is 5 power already in Sokovia, which is going to make it a little bit easier for us to lock it down with a Professor X play. And so they do drop their Vulture, so it does look like they're probably going to try to push power over to the left. But if we can lock this down before they can move anything, then that's going to give us a much better upside. And so let's go ahead and lock in the Professor X play. I think we have a decent shot here against a Reclusive Mind because they can't do anything huge. They can't do a huge power move here. Ooh, so they do Arrow, which means that they win this location because we only have 8 power here. We can't play our Claw to push additional power here. So we have to rely on the fact that we are going to come down to a tiebreaker here. If they do the math, they will probably retreat, I think, unless they have a way to push power here. So right now we're tied in the flooded lane. There's no additional way for them to push more power. They also don't know where our actual Mysterio is. We're currently tied in the far left lane. This lane we have 8 total power, so we're down by 4. In Luke's Bar, if we skip here, we're going to end up having 10 power in this lane. So that would be the tiebreaker between Sokovia and Luke's Bar, and we would win Luke's by more than they won Sokovia. And so they used the retreat later option. They were just waiting for us to lock in our play. They didn't have a path to win. Without being able to push these cards with Heimdall or do some kind of really big last turn play, it made it really difficult for them to lock in their move for the game. All right, so next up we have Boost Tofu. The first location is Crimson Cosmos, so we're not going to be able to really play much over there. We could potentially do like a Jessica Jones and then shift our focus into the other lanes, or we could shift our focus out of those other lanes. So we pull into Sakaar, or Sakaar pulls into our Professor X, it pulls into their Jessica Jones, which is huge. The only way we can potentially beat their power is with a Claw. We're going to need a Claw play into the Crimson Cosmos to have any chance. That is our only shot, our only opportunity to get everything we ever wanted. And they're gonna think that they have a pretty good shot here. If I was in their spot, if I was in their shoes, I would snap right away. As soon as I saw this come down, I would have snapped. We do know that we have the small chance of being able to push additional power there. And so that's what we're hanging our hat on, is a small glimpse of hope. We have a 50-50 shot at this point. We have 3 chances out of 6 cards to pull into Claw, and that is what we need. Okay, and so they use a wave, and so we're actually able to drop Onslaught early. And so then even if we do end up drawing into our Claw or our Blue Marvel, we should be okay. Interesting nonetheless. So we're going to do the Onslaught into Crimson Cosmos. We have to hope that they don't have an Enchantress or that. Okay. So let's go with the Blue Marvel play, and then we hold. So they may do an Enchantress. To be able to win Sakar, we have to draw into Claw. Otherwise, we have to be able to win the Vault and the Crimson Cosmos lane. So they just drop a Sunspot. So they're going for the boost with skipping their turn. We went with the boost with Blue Marvel. We are slightly winning the location right now. My only hope here is that they can't play anything into the Crimson Cosmos. That's the only chance. And it's not a good chance. We're gonna go ahead and skip. I hope that they don't have enough power. Ooh, so they do a Professor X, but that's fine. We skip, which allows our Sunspot to buff up over theirs. And so I don't know how to tell if a player is a bot anymore, unless it's just like a really poor play line. But for this one, I am going to go ahead and leave it in. We are going to go ahead and end the video after that win. Overall, that one felt like it could have went a lot of different ways. I think we got pretty fortunate with the wave into Onslaught. The Sakar was unfortunate. We had several chances to draw on the Claw, and we just couldn't quite do it. But overall, we are gonna go ahead and end the video here. The deck list itself feels pretty decent. You need to be able to get comfortable with it and assess what your power level and power range is going to be. That way, if the opponent has the advantage, you tactically retreat, try to conserve your cubes, snap when you do have the advantage, or you know you're going to be able to drop a big, massive like late game Onslaught to push yourself over the edge in like a Professor X or a stormed location. But I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave it a like and a comment down below. As always, this is TLSG. Later, guys.